Friends, hello everyone. Narrator is here. We continue the section of film retellings, and today we have the film The Founder, the true story about how poor dreamer built empire McDonald's. Enjoy watching. The film begins with the inscription that the plot of the film is based on real events. Next, we see Ray Kroc, a middle-aged American, trying to sell a cocktail mixer to the owner of one of the local eateries that was in the 1950s. The deal turns out to be unsuccessful for Ray, and he angrily gets into his car and reviews his diary, where he has written all the addresses of customers that he needs to call in to offer this mixer. Along the way, he stops at another local eatery, but as usual for that time, he has to wait for his order in the car for a very long time. So his next days pass, he travels to offer cocktail mixers to business owners and stops at the same eateries along the way, but the service there is the same everywhere that was in those years in the USA. He stops at a motel to spend the night and go back to sell his wares the next morning. Before going to bed, he communicates with his wife and has to lie that the mixers are selling well so as not to disappoint her. His state of mind is worse than ever, so that he has at least a little hope for a brighter future. He listens to motivational speeches in his room and believes that he will succeed. The next day, after another unsuccessful sale, he speaks on the phone with the secretary, who tells him the addresses where he needs to go. And unexpectedly, one institution received an order for 6 mixers at once. Ray thinks it's a mistake and calls the owner of this cafe to check the accuracy of the order. But instead of lowering the number of mixers, the cafe owner raises his order to 8 mixers and Ray drives straight there. When he arrives at the place, he sees a huge sign, McDonald's, and a large line of people who are standing there. Ray is worried that the line is long, but the girl next door reassures him and says that everything is very fast here. When it's his turn to order, he takes a Coke and a hamburger and they immediately give him an order. Ray is at a loss as to how quickly his order is ready, and instead of a knife and fork, just food wrapped in paper. He sits down on a bench and begins to eat, as a man approaches him, who introduces himself as McDonald, one of the co-owners of the restaurant. Ray is delighted with the hamburger and Mac takes him on a tour of the kitchen. The difference between these restaurants and others is that they have a high production rate of hamburgers and fries. Everything works flawlessly and the fast food technology is a personal invention of the brothers. Ray is delighted with this and invites the brothers to dinner together to listen to their story and how it came to this restaurant format. That same evening they meet together and Mac and Dick tell Ray their story. In the 1920s, 2 brothers went to work in a film studio in the western United States as a decorator. They made money there and decided to open their own small cinema in a small town, but due to the crisis of those times, they had to close due to the fact that they went bankrupt. In the 1940s, the trend went to street restaurants and the brothers realized that this was their chance, because people always want to eat. She opened a small cafe, typical for those times, and at first they had a profit, but this business format has a lot of costs, and Dick proposed a new format. To begin with, they removed all the dishes and replaced them with paper packaging and fired the waitresses so that the client himself took his order, and the most important thing that they realized was that they received 83% of their income from hamburgers, potatoes, and cola. And they cut the menu. The brothers went out to the tennis court and drew the layout of their cafe with chalk, and there they began to make their technology for the quick work of the kitchen. A couple of days later, a new format restaurant was ready, but it turned out to be a failure. People did not understand that they had to go for the order themselves, and the brothers came up with a new idea. Put on a show to get more attention. Everything was fine until flies began to fly into the light and the holiday turned out to be a failure. They were already starting to rearrange, when a boy knocked on the window and asked for a couple of hamburgers. Mac turned on the grill and made it for him. After that, customers began to come non-stop. After this evening, Ray lies in bed and cannot sleep. He is in awe of the history of McDonald's and understands that he wants to be a part of it all. In the morning, he goes to the brothers and offers to open a franchise for them, because one restaurant is not enough, everyone should know about this fast food idea. But the brothers say that they have already tried and it didn't work out because they had to keep control, and remotely it's hard. They believe that it is better to have one restaurant, but which is better than several ordinary ones. Ray is not ready to give up and tells his wife about this restaurant, but she taunts him because he has been dreaming of different business ideas all his life. A couple of days later, Ray again comes to the brothers and says that McDonald's can become a place where American family people will gather. This can become a restaurant not just with food, but a real tradition of Americans. The brothers confer and decide to give the franchise a second chance, but this time with Ray in charge. They enter into an agreement where Ray will have a small percentage of income. Money is needed to open a second restaurant, and Ray runs around the banks to offer them to become part of McDonald's, but no one gives loans, because everyone recognizes him as a loser who has been offering everyone his failed business ideas all his life. And he has no choice but to put his house on the security of a loan, but he does not tell his wife about this. The construction of the first franchise restaurant has begun and it has begun its work, but in order to grow even faster, Ray goes to the restaurant and meets with his friends, where he invites them to participate in this. At first they laughed at him, like with all his previous ideas, but therefore, they listened and acted as investors in the McDonald's franchise. The construction of other restaurants began and the thing that the brothers feared most happened. They began to lose control over quality. Chicken wings began to appear on the menu, and lettuce on hamburgers. Ray is furious about this and tells everyone to his face what he thinks about his friends who messed up the concept of the restaurant. After a while, in his office, he meets a Jew who is trying to sell the Bible to his secretary, and then Ray invited him to become an investor in the next restaurant in Illinois. There were 2 people at the opening of the restaurant. He and his wife. And Ray realized that he needed couples to open a restaurant. Because only family people can share the idea of McDonald's. Ray travels all over the US and it is couples who are offered to become part of the McDonald's family. He is present at every opening of restaurants and personally gets acquainted with each investor. At one of these meetings, he realizes that investors themselves are already lining up behind him. But there is one problem, namely the bills. Ray is running out of money. He receives only 1.5% of income and this is not enough to grow at such a pace further. He asks the brothers to increase the percentage, but they refuse. In addition, the bank asks Ray to pay off the debt, otherwise the interest will increase. At one of their investor dinners, they complain to Ray that the electricity bills are huge because ice cream fridges use the most electricity. And they immediately offer the idea to replace the usual milkshake with a powder one. You just need to add the contents of the sachet to a glass of water and stir, after which you get a cocktail that cannot be distinguished from the real one. Ray is happy with this idea because it will cut the electricity bills, but the McDonald brothers are against it because it completely contradicts the quality standards that are so important to them. Then we are shown Ray back at the bank. He is trying to persuade them to give a loan deferment because he has only 1.5% of the income, but he is the head of the franchise and the growth of the campaign depends on him. In the same bank, next to him, there was a young financier who, being a fan of this network, offered Ray a financial consultation. As a result, he proposed not only to sell the franchise at 1.5% of income, but to lease the land on which the restaurant will stand. It is impossible to build an empire if the head of the franchise has only 1.5% of the profits. That's what the financial advisor told him. Ray opens a campaign that takes over land for restaurants, but without his brothers. The number of McDonald's grew very quickly. In a couple of months they increased several times. Dick and Mac were very excited about this growth and the fact that Ray decides everything himself. At one of his dinners with his wife, he asks for a divorce. Because he decided to marry the wife of one of the investors, because she is the same dreamer as he is. And besides, they have a lot in common. The growth rate of McDonald's was huge and the brothers wanted to get Ray out of the business because he was getting out of control. The brothers have one restaurant in the desert, and Ray has a restaurant empire in 17 states. In addition, Ray completely refuses to give at least 1% of the shares of McDonald's to his wife after the divorce. Due to such business changes, Mac passes out due to diabetes and ends up in the hospital. Ray comes to visit him at the hospital and gives him a blank check, then we see them all together, at the same table. The brothers receive $2.7 million and a 1% stake in the campaign via a handshake. Thus, Ray becomes the sole owner of a large chain of McDonald's fast food restaurants. Mac and Ray go to the restroom together, and Ray wonders why Ray didn't open a similar establishment himself, if he knew its concept completely. The answer was simple: McDonald's sounds American and is credible, no other name can replace the restaurant. The film ends with documentary footage from Ray Kroc and the inscription that the brothers never received their 1%, and McDonald's became a global franchise. That's the whole retelling of the film The Founder, a true story about how a poor dreamer was able to build a global fast food empire that has become a symbol of fast food. If you like this retelling, then do not forget to like this video and click on the subscribe button. You can also watch other retellings on this channel.